Tiny fingers glide across the smooth surface of a screen with a confidence that even their parents might envy. For Generation Alpha, born after 2010, the world has always fit in the palm of their hand, in the form of a smartphone. This is the first generation that knows no reality without touchscreens and instant access to information. According to studies, the average modern child receives their first gadget at 6 years old, and by 10, 9 out of 10 children already own their own mobile device. They spend 3 to 7 hours daily in the digital world, time comparable to school lessons. Technology has become not just a tool, but a natural extension of their body and mind, an integral part of their perception of the world. And here a fundamental philosophical question arises. Is a future without smartphones possible for these children? Can a generation that has never known a world without digital devices imagine their lives without them? And what will happen if one day these small rectangles of light disappear from their hands? Generation Alpha, the first true digital natives in human history. Born after 2010, these children have never known a world without high-speed internet, smart devices, and social media. Unlike millennials, who experienced the era of rotary phones and slow internet, or Generation Z, who witnessed the transitional period of the digital revolution, Alphas were born into a fully formed digital ecosystem. They are distinguished by a unique perception of reality, where virtual and physical spaces do not exist in parallel, but in constant intertwining. For them, there is no division into online and offline. There is a single, continuous reality in which digital tools serve as a natural extension of consciousness. Sociologists note a key feature of this generation. For them, technology is not an innovation, but a given. If previous generations perceived each new device with enthusiasm and some awe, Alphas treat technological novelties as something self-evident. They intuitively master new interfaces without needing instructions, as if they possess an inherent digital instinct. Research shows that the brains of Generation Alpha representatives are physically formed differently. Constant interaction with touchscreens and multimedia content develops unique neural connections responsible for multitasking and rapid processing of visual information. Simultaneously, a transformation of the mechanisms of long-term memory and attention span is observed. In a world where technology has become an inseparable part of everyday life, an introduction to digital devices begins practically from the cradle. A bright screen becomes one of the first objects to attract an infant's attention, alongside rattles and mobiles above the crib. The glowing rectangle of a smartphone is like a magnet for tiny eyes, forming their first perceptions of the world. Modern parents increasingly resort to digital pacification, a phenomenon that has been dubbed the digital pacifier. A crying baby instantly quiets down when a bright cartoon appears on a tablet within their field of vision. Studies show that by the age of 2, over 70% of children regularly interact with touchscreens, and by 3, they confidently unlock devices and find their favorite apps independently. Neuroscientists note that such early digital stimulation fundamentally affects brain development. The period from birth to 6 years is critical for the formation of neural connections. During this time, the brain is especially receptive and literally molds itself under the influence of external stimuli. Intense visual stimulation from screens activates some areas of the brain, but can slow the development of others. A child who receives primary information through rapidly changing images forms special neural pathways, oriented towards quick processing of visual information, but potentially at the expense of deep attention skills and textual information processing. This is not just a habit. It is a fundamental tuning of the nervous system that will influence the perception of the world throughout life. For Generation Alpha, the smartphone has become more than just a device. It has transformed into an extension of their personality, an integral part of their self-identification. Philosophers and psychologists speak of the phenomenon of the extended self, where the boundaries between a person and their digital device blur beyond recognition. A child perceives the smartphone as a natural continuation of their cognitive abilities, as part of their own psychological structure. When 10-year-old Misha was asked how he felt without his phone, the boy replied, "It's like a part of me disappears, as if I'm losing an arm or a leg." This is not just a metaphor. It is a reflection of a deep psychological symbiosis. Studies show that 80% of teenagers experience genuine anxiety when their phone battery dies, and 65% regularly check their device even without notifications. Nomophobia, the fear of being without a mobile phone, has become a widespread phenomenon among the younger generation. The symptoms of this condition surprisingly resemble classic manifestations of anxiety disorder: increased heart rate, sweating, disorientation, panic attacks. Psychologists note that for Generation Alpha, the lack of access to a smartphone is perceived not merely as an inconvenience, but as an existential threat. There is something deeply symbolic in this psychological fusion. Through the smartphone, a child not only consumes information, they project their personality into the digital space. Avatars, profiles, stories, likes become digital artifacts of identity, ways of self-expression and self-affirmation. Let's imagine a thought experiment. 7 in the morning on an ordinary weekday. Millions of Gen Alpha children and teenagers wake up and, as usual, reach for their smartphones on their nightstands. But this morning, the devices don't respond. Not a single one, across the entire world. Black screens, complete silence from notifications. Day 0 has arrived. The first few minutes are met with bewilderment. Rebooting doesn't help. Calling friends is impossible. Panic rises in waves. 12-year-old Sophia from Moscow feels her heart rate quicken. She can't check messages from friends, can't find out her homework, can't turn on her usual playlist for getting ready in the morning. The world suddenly becomes frighteningly quiet and empty. Psychologists call this state digital amputation, when something that was perceived as part of the body suddenly disappears. The first hours without smartphones for Gen Alpha are comparable to physiological withdrawal, anxiety, disorientation, a sense of isolation. Studies show that the stress level in such a situation is comparable to experiencing a real loss. By noon of the first day, the irreversibility of the situation sinks in. The adaptation phase begins. 13-year-old Alex from Berlin takes a board game off the shelf for the first time in years. A group of 10-year-old children in a San Francisco park spontaneously organizes a game of tag. In the school cafeteria, instead of parallel scrolling through feeds, there are live conversations, awkward, intermittent, but real. Let's imagine a world where Generation Alpha suddenly lost their smartphones. How would their social reality change? The first few weeks of such a transition could be compared to immersing oneself in a foreign culture without knowing the language. Children, accustomed to mediated communication through screens, would find themselves in a space of direct social interactions, where a message cannot be edited before sending, and emotions are read not from emojis, but from micro-expressions on the face. Researchers in child psychology note that in such a scenario, Generation Alpha would face a phenomenon of social nakedness, where the familiar digital shell disappears, revealing true communicative skills. 14-year-old Lisa admits, "It's easier for me to write a message than to say the same thing looking someone in the eye. In correspondence, I have time to think." Paradoxically, the absence of smartphones could lead to a temporary social vacuum, and then to a revival of forgotten forms of communication. Schoolyards would be filled with live conversations instead of parallel scrolling. Yard games requiring direct interaction would be resurrected. The digital wall would disappear, where people are physically in the same room but emotionally absent. Psychologists suggest that such a transition would be accompanied by a temporary increase in social anxiety. Children would have to relearn how to read nonverbal cues, understand intonations, and maintain pauses in conversation. But it is precisely these skills that form profound empathy, the ability to truly feel another person. Let's imagine a school of the future, without smartphones and digital technologies. Classrooms where, instead of tablets, there are paper textbooks. Instead of interactive whiteboards, chalkboards. Instead of online tests, written exams. For Generation Alpha, such an educational environment would look almost like a journey to another era. The cognitive processes of children who grew up with gadgets would undergo significant changes. Memory, accustomed to relying on external digital storage, would face the necessity of retaining large volumes of information. Studies show that modern school children remember not the information itself, but the path to it, where and how to find it. In a world without smartphones, they would have to relearn the art of memorization. Attention, fragmented by constant notifications and multitasking, would gradually restore its ability for sustained concentration. Neuroscientists note, in the absence of digital distractions, the brain naturally returns to a mode of deep immersion in a task. Analytical thinking, partly outsourced to algorithms and search engines, would once again become a sought-after skill. Instead of asking artificial intelligence, students would have to independently establish cause and effect relationships, formulate hypotheses, and seek solutions. Alternative teaching methods would experience a revival. Socratic dialogue, problem-based learning, project-based methods. All that existed before the digital revolution, but was partly displaced by technology. Teachers would once again become the primary guides of knowledge, rather than moderators of digital content. What happens to the brain when it is suddenly deprived of its usual digital stimulation? This question becomes key when considering a hypothetical future without smartphones for Generation Alpha. Neurobiologists assert that the brain is an incredibly plastic organ, capable of radical restructuring even after many years of established patterns. Constant interaction with digital devices forms a specific architecture of neuroconnections. Rapid task switching, instant processing of short information blocks, and responding to visual stimuli. All these skills are developed in modern children to an unprecedented degree. However, other cognitive functions may remain underdeveloped. Upon giving up smartphones, a peculiar neurorestoration occurs. In the first few weeks, the brain experiences stress similar to withdrawal syndrome. The dopamine system, accustomed to constant stimulation through notifications and likes, signals discomfort. But then, neuroplasticity processes are initiated. Surprisingly, studies show that after just 21 days without intense digital stimulation, children and adolescents exhibit an increase in gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for planning, decision-making, and self-control. The ability for deep reading, where the brain fully immerses itself in text, creating rich mental images, begins to recover after about a month of regular practice with physical books. Imagine a world where children once again play hide and seek in the yard. Not mobile games. Where families gather for board games in the evenings, instead of spending time each glued to their own screen. Such a scenario might seem utopian, but a cultural shift towards analog entertainment is already beginning to manifest itself. Quietly, but noticeably. Paradoxically, it is precisely in this era of digital oversaturation that traditional forms of leisure are acquiring new value. Board game sales have grown by 30% in the last 5 years, and independent bookstores are experiencing an unexpected resurgence. Children, who have unlimited access to virtual worlds, suddenly discover the charm in tactile experiences, in the roughness of dice, in the smell of a new book, in physical interaction with other people. Analog entertainment offers what digital lacks: a full sensory experience. When 10-year-old Masha from St. Petersburg first played Monopoly with her parents, she was amazed. It's completely different from on the phone. You see people's faces, you hear them laugh, you can touch the pieces. Child development researchers note that traditional outdoor games, tag, Cossacks and robbers, hopscotch, develop not only physical skills but also social intelligence. Children learn to negotiate rules, resolve conflicts, read emotions, all things that cannot be fully mastered through a screen. The return to analog entertainment is not a rejection of progress, but rather a search for balance. It is an acknowledgement that some human needs remain constant despite technological evolution. The need for direct contact, for tactile sensations, for collaborative creativity without digital intermediaries. When we deprive a child of a constant flow of ready-made images and information, an amazing thing happens. Their mind begins to create its own worlds. In silence and seeming emptiness, true creativity is born. It's like a blank canvas for an artist. Its very whiteness provokes the imagination to begin its work. Boredom, which modern parents fear so much, and from which they protect their children with endless entertainment, turns out to be fertile ground for creativity. Neuroscientists have established, during moments of apparent inaction, the brain activates the so-called default mode network, a system of neural connections responsible for creative thinking and idea generation. 7-year-old Vera spent the weekend at her grandmother's village house without internet. The first few hours were filled with complaints of boredom. But by the evening of the second day, her parents found her completely engrossed in creating an entire cardboard city with invented characters and complex storylines. "I didn't even know I could make something like this," the girl admitted, surprised. When visual images are not provided ready-made, the brain is forced to create them itself. Reading paper books activates completely different neural circuits than watching videos. Words on a page transform into images, sounds, smells. Each reader becomes the director of their own internal film. Social media algorithms and recommendation systems subtly narrow horizons, offering content similar to what has already been viewed. Without these digital frameworks, children gain the freedom to think outside the box, to go beyond prescribed patterns. Studies show just 2 weeks without social media significantly increase the originality of ideas when solving creative tasks. Imagination is not just the ability to fantasize. It is a fundamental tool for understanding the world and other people, the basis of empathy and abstract thinking. These very qualities become critically important in an era when routine tasks are increasingly automated, and the value of the human mind shifts towards creativity and innovation. In a world of constant informational noise, it is particularly difficult for Generation Alpha to find space for existential reflection. When every second of silence is filled with notifications, and every question immediately receives an answer from a search engine, is there any room left for genuine self-discovery? Philosophers of all times have emphasized, true wisdom is born in silence and solitude, in moments of contemplation and inner dialogue. For a modern teenager, digital detox becomes not just a break from gadgets, but a true existential experience. 15-year-old Sonia from Novosibirsk, after a week at a camp without a phone, shared a surprising discovery. "I heard my own thoughts for the first time. It turns out they sound completely different from the phrases from videos that I'm used to repeating." Without a constant external flow of information, children face fundamental questions that humanity has been asking itself for millennia. Who am I? What is the meaning of my existence? What makes me happy? Questions that are easily drowned out by endless scrolling through feeds, but inevitably surface in moments of digital silence. Researchers from Stanford University found that teenagers who spend at least 3 days a month without digital devices demonstrate a higher level of self-awareness and clarity regarding their life goals. They more often reflect on their true desires, separating them from externally imposed standards of success and happiness. The paradox of the information age is that access to infinite knowledge does not guarantee wisdom. When answers to any questions can be obtained instantly, the value of independently seeking truth is lost. That process which philosophers considered the essence of human existence. For Generation Alpha, life without smartphones can become a journey to oneself, a return to the ancient art of self-knowledge through reflection, observation, and inner dialogue. The golden mean between full immersion in the digital world and its complete denial. That's what we should strive for in raising Generation Alpha. The concept of digital well-being suggests that we view technology not as an absolute good or evil, but as a tool requiring conscious use. Just as we teach children healthy eating, it's essential to cultivate a culture of healthy digital consumption. Research shows children whose parents set reasonable boundaries for gadget use demonstrate higher levels of psychological well-being and academic achievement. The key principle here is not the quantity, but the quality of the digital experience. 12-year-old Maria shares, "My parents and I agreed that I can use the tablet for creating animations and educational programs without restrictions, and for entertainment, no more than an hour a day. It was difficult at first, but now I notice that my own projects bring much more satisfaction." Psychologists recommend parents use the digital islands strategy, designating gadget-free zones and times in the home. Family dinners, bedtime, and joint walks become spaces for live communication and the development of emotional intelligence. Schools are also beginning to implement digital literacy programs, teaching children critical thinking and information hygiene skills. Instead of banning smartphones, progressive educators teach how to analyze content, recognize manipulation, and create, not just consume, digital content.
I wouldn't survive a day without my phone.
How would I communicate with friends? How would I know what's happening in the world? Exclaims 12-year-old Elisa from Moscow emotionally. Many of her peers share her opinion. However, not all representatives of Generation Alpha are so categorical in their assessments. "Sometimes I intentionally leave my phone at home when I go out with friends," admits 13-year-old Mark. "Without it, we come up with more interesting games and talk more." A large-scale study conducted among children aged 8 to 14 in 10 countries revealed a surprising fact. Almost a third of respondents experience ambivalent feelings towards their gadgets. They acknowledge their dependence but at the same time express a desire to unplug sometimes. 10-year-old Sofia from Barcelona says, "When my whole family goes to the mountains for the weekend, where there's no internet, I'm angry the first day. And then it even becomes more interesting." The results of the Week Without Smartphones experiment, conducted in several European schools, are particularly telling. Children kept diaries of their feelings. The first few days' entries were filled with words like boredom, irritation, lostness. By the end of the week, completely different characteristics appeared: freedom, calmness, new discoveries. Surprisingly, many children demonstrate a high level of awareness regarding the impact of technology on their lives. "I know I get irritable when I spend too much time on my phone," reflects 11-year-old Timur. "And I sleep worse. But it's still hard to stop." Younger children, aged 6 to 9, often talk about physical sensations. "Eyes get tired. Head hurts. I want to run, not sit." Researchers note, the older children get, the more ambivalent their attitude towards digital devices becomes. They begin to notice not only the advantages, but also the disadvantages of constant connectivity. 14-year-old Maria admits, "Sometimes I envy my parents who grew up without social media. They didn't have to constantly compare their lives with other people's perfect pictures." What will society be like if it rethinks the role of technology in the lives of the younger generation? This is not just a question about gadgets, but also about the fundamental values that define our future. A possible change in attitude towards smartphones could become a catalyst for deeper social transformations affecting all spheres of life. The economy, which for decades has been oriented towards digital consumption, would face the need for re-evaluation. The multi-billion-dollar industry of mobile applications and online entertainment would give way to new sectors: the production of high-quality analog games, educational materials, and spaces for live interaction. We are already seeing the genesis of this trend today. Digital detox centers, gadget-free family clubs, and restaurants with phone-free zones are emerging. The cultural sphere is also undergoing transformation. Short, fragmented content is being replaced by a demand for deep, thoughtful works. Young directors are experimenting with formats that require sustained concentration. Theaters offer immersive productions, where the audience becomes part of the action, an experience impossible in digital space. Interpersonal relationships acquire new value in a society weary of superficial online contacts. Sociologists note a revival of the culture of shared pastime. Family dinners without phones, friends gatherings with board games, neighborhood communities. The ability to be truly present in the moment becomes social capital that is highly valued. The emerging system of values balances technological progress and human nature. Society begins to understand. Technology should serve man, not man technology. Conscious consumption, digital awareness, the right to disconnect. These concepts become part of a new social contract. Schools are implementing digital well-being programs alongside coding lessons, recognizing the importance of both sides of technological education. Our journey through digital labyrinths is drawing to a close, and it's time to ask the main question. What do we want the future of Generation Alpha to look like? A world without smartphones is neither a utopia nor a dystopia. It is an alternative reality, the possibility of which depends on our decisions today. Philosophical inquiry has shown, technologies are neither an absolute good nor an absolute evil. They are a tool, whose value is determined by how we use it. Like fire, which can warm or burn, digital devices can both enrich a child's life and impoverish their experience of knowing the world. Consciousness becomes the key principle of a balanced approach. Parents and educators must help children not just use technologies, but understand their impact. When a child realizes how their mood, concentration, and creative abilities change depending on the time spent with a gadget, they gain an invaluable skill of self-regulation. The second principle is diversity of experience. A child's brain needs multifaceted stimulation: tactile, gustatory, olfactory, kinesthetic. No virtual world can replace the joy of building a snowman, the smell of freshly baked bread, or the feeling of warm sand between the toes. The richer the sensory experience in childhood, the fuller the perception of the world will be in adulthood. The third principle is genuine presence. Being truly here and now becomes a rare and valuable skill in an age of constant notifications. The ability to fully immerse oneself in the moment, be it a conversation, a game, or contemplation of nature, makes life richer and deeper. The future of Generation Alpha is not a choice between technologies and their absence. It is a choice of a model of interaction with the digital world, where technologies serve humanity and not humanity serving technologies. It is a future where the smartphone is just one of many tools for understanding the world, and not its replacement. We stand at a crossroads, and our task is not to shield children from technologies, but to teach them wisdom in handling them. The future is in our hands, and in the hands of those who are just beginning their journey in this amazing world, where the digital and the real intertwine into a single fabric of being.